It was a warm afternoon when Mira walked quietly into the music school. The sun was shining outside, but she wore a plain shawl around her shoulders and walked as if she didn't want to be noticed. Her steps were slow, careful. She wasn't old, but her face had the calmness of someone who had lived many years. She looked around the room, holding a small folder in her hands, unsure if she had come to the right place. The music school was located near the town center, a large building with polished wooden floors, glass doors, and framed photos of past students on the walls. Inside, it was busy. Young students moved from one room to another, carrying violins, flutes, and notebooks. Some were laughing, some were serious, and most were too busy to notice the woman standing quietly at the entrance. A young receptionist finally looked up from her desk. "Yes? Can I help you?" she asked, trying not to sound rude but clearly in a hurry. Mira gave a gentle smile. "I was hoping to learn piano here. I saw the notice outside." The receptionist blinked, surprised. She looked at Mira from head to toe. The woman didn't look like the usual kind of student. Her clothes were plain, her shoes slightly worn out. She looked like someone's mother, or grandmother, who had walked into the wrong building. "You want to join the beginner's batch?" the girl asked slowly, as if Mira might not understand her. "Yes, if possible," Mira replied. "I've always loved music. I thought maybe I could start learning now." The receptionist nodded uncertainly and handed her a form. "Fill this out, please. I'll call someone from the piano faculty." As Mira sat down to write her details, some students passing by looked at her curiously. It wasn't often that someone like her showed up. Most piano students here were children or teenagers. Some were young adults preparing for auditions. Mira didn't fit in. When she finished the form, she handed it back with a small "thank you." A few minutes later, a man in a blazer entered. He looked like he was in his 40s and carried himself with the air of someone important. He introduced himself as Mr. Deshmukh, head of the piano department. "So you want to learn piano?" he asked, looking her up and down. "Yes," Mira said simply. "Have you ever played before?" he asked, already assuming the answer. "I used to, a long time ago," she replied softly. He said, not sounding very convinced. "Well, we can put you in the basic batch. But first, we need to see your level. You know, just to make sure you're placed correctly." Mira nodded. "Come with me," he said, turning around without waiting for a reply. She followed him through a corridor lined with practice rooms. The sound of violins tuning, piano keys being played, and vocal exercises filled the air. When they reached a small recital room with a grand piano in the center, he opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Inside, a few students were sitting on chairs, chatting. A couple of other teachers were there too, one of them sipping tea. When they saw Mira walk in, their faces showed mild surprise. "This lady wants to learn piano," Mr. Deshmukh said, almost as if it were a joke. "She says she used to play. I thought we could give her something to try out." One of the younger teachers chuckled. "We're giving entry tests now?" Another added, "Maybe we should hand her La Campanella and see how long she lasts." There was some soft laughter in the room. Mira heard it, but she said nothing. She just stood quietly, looking at the piano. Mr. Deshmukh walked to a shelf and pulled out some sheet music. "Let's see," he mumbled, flipping through pages. "Ah, yes, here." He handed her a piece of music. It was difficult, not something a beginner could play, not even after months of training. It was filled with fast passages, complicated fingerwork, and delicate dynamics. Even advanced students struggled with it. "Try this," he said, with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just play what you can." Mira took the sheet gently. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't complain. She simply walked toward the piano, placed the sheet on the stand, and sat down. Her hands rested on her lap for a moment. She took a breath. The students watched with interest. Some expected her to freeze. Others thought she might hit a few notes, get nervous, and leave. One even whispered, "She's going to break the poor Steinway." But Mira didn't hesitate. Her hands rose to the keys like they belonged there. And then, without warning, music filled the room. At first it was confusion. The students looked at each other, unsure. The first few notes were clean, precise. Then came the complex runs, the shifting rhythms. And every note, every single one, was perfect. Mira's fingers danced over the keys. There was no hesitation, no doubt. Her back was straight, her eyes calm, and her expression full of something rare. A quiet joy. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply playing as if the piano was a part of her, as if the notes were old. Friends returning after a long time. The teachers stood frozen. One of them had a cup of tea in his hand that had gone cold. Mr. Deshmukh didn't move. His mouth was slightly open. The students who had been ready to laugh were now sitting completely still. Minute after minute passed, and the music only grew richer. There was control, beauty, emotion. This was not the playing of a beginner. This was someone who had lived inside music. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Mira lifted her hands gently and let the last note fade into silence. No one spoke. She turned around slowly. "Was that okay?" she asked, genuinely unsure. It was only then that anyone moved. One of the teachers took a step forward, blinking as if waking up from a dream. Where did you learn to play like that?" Mira gave a small smile. "A long time ago." The silence stretched again. Finally, Mr. Deshmukh spoke. This time with no arrogance. "Ma'am, that was extraordinary." Mira looked down at her hands, as if they had done something without her knowing. "I wasn't sure if I still remembered. It's been years." "You remembered," one of the students said softly, almost in awe. Nobody laughed now. No one smirked. The same people who had judged her a few minutes ago were now watching her like she was someone from another world. The recital room felt different now. It was no longer just a practice space. It had become a place where something magical had happened. Mira stood up slowly, not wanting to disturb the quiet. "Thank you for letting me try," she said. "Please wait," Mr. Deshmukh said quickly. "We should talk. There's something I'd like to ask." But Mira just nodded politely. "Of course, maybe after a cup of tea?" And with that, she walked toward the door, her steps calm as ever, leaving behind a room full of people who would never look at her the same way again. They had thought she was a simple woman trying something new. They had no idea they had just listened to a virtuoso returning to her first love. The recital room was still quiet after Mira left. Even though the sound of her music had faded, something about the room felt changed. The teachers stood in silence, and the students whispered to each other in low voices. No one could believe what they had just seen. A woman who looked like someone's mother, maybe someone's grandmother, had played one of the most difficult piano pieces like it was second nature. Her fingers had moved with confidence, with feeling, with magic. Mr. Deshmukh was the first to speak. That wasn't just skill, that was mastery." His voice was not loud anymore. It didn't have the same pride and confidence it usually did. Now it was full of surprise, even a bit of shame. He remembered how he had handed her the difficult piece just to make her feel small, just to politely scare her away. He had assumed she would struggle, maybe even panic. Instead, she had stunned everyone. One of the younger teachers, Mr. Karen, shook his head and said, "She didn't even warm up. She just sat and played like it was nothing." A few students nodded, still looking toward the piano, as if it might start playing by itself again. Mr. Deshmukh walked to the sheet music and stared at it. "We gave her Liszt. Not an easy version, the full version, and she didn't even flinch. She made it sound beautiful," said one girl in the back. Not just perfect, but beautiful. After a few more minutes, the room slowly returned to its normal self. The teachers made their way out, some heading back to their offices, others still talking about what had happened. Mr. Deshmukh, however, went straight to the main office and told the receptionist to call Mira back the next day. He didn't want to waste time. The next morning, Mira came again, just as quietly as before. She wore a different shawl, equally simple, and carried a small cloth bag. The receptionist smiled at her this time, not out of politeness, but out of genuine respect. "The piano teachers are waiting for you, ma'am," she said. Mira smiled gently. "I hope I didn't cause any trouble yesterday." "Not at all," the girl replied. "Everyone's been talking about you." Mira followed the same path. As yesterday, past the music rooms through the hallway filled with student chatter and music practice. But this time, the people she passed didn't ignore her. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with admiration. A few even nodded respectfully. Inside the music room, the mood was different. Mr. Deshmukh greeted her with a warm handshake. So did the other teachers. There was no laughter today, no joking. "We'd like to speak with you, Mira ji," Mr. Deshmukh said as she sat down. "Please forgive us for our behavior yesterday. We were unaware of your skill." Mira looked slightly surprised. "There's nothing to forgive. I didn't tell you anything. I just wanted to play again." Mr. Karen leaned forward. "Where did you learn to play like that? You were incredible." She hesitated. Her fingers played with the edge of her shawl. "I used to study piano seriously many years ago. I even performed here and there." "Where?" Another teacher asked softly. "Europe. Mostly Germany and Austria. I lived there for some years when I was young. I trained under some strict but kind teachers. Music was everything to me back then." "Then what happened?" asked Mr. Deshmukh, genuinely curious. Mira gave a small, sad smile. "Life happened. I returned to India when my father fell ill. My mother was not well either. I took care of them for many years. After they passed away, I just didn't go back to music. I thought maybe that part of me was gone. But it's not," one of the teachers said quickly. "It's still very much alive." "Maybe," Mira replied, "but I didn't come here to impress anyone. I only wanted to touch the keys again, to feel the music in my fingers." "That's all?" Mr. Deshmukh exchanged glances with the others. "We would like to offer you something." She looked up, curious. "We'd like you to join us, not just as a student but perhaps as an instructor, or even just as someone who can guide our advanced students. Someone with your talent should not be sitting in beginner classes." Mira shook her head gently. "No, I'm not ready for that. I haven't taught in years. I came here with a quiet heart. Let me stay like that for now." They didn't press her. They saw something in her eyes that told them this woman had returned to music not to chase fame, but to heal something deep inside her. But not everyone at the school was pleased. Later that day, whispers started to spread among the students and even a few teachers. Some felt that it was unfair. A woman who had just walked in had suddenly become the center of attention. A few thought she was probably exaggerating her past. Others felt threatened. Jealousy is a quiet but dangerous thing, and in the world of art, it often hides behind smiles. Still, Mira remained the same. She came to the school every day at the same time, practiced for an hour or two, and then left quietly. She didn't speak much, didn't try to make friends. But people started to watch her, trying to learn from her hands, her posture, her focus. One day, Mr. Deshmukh asked her to sit in on a class where an advanced student was preparing for a competition. The girl was nervous, trying hard to play a Chopin piece but kept making small mistakes. Mira watched for a while, then softly walked over and placed her hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "Close your eyes for a moment," she said. "Don't think about the notes. Think about the story the music is telling." Every piece is a story. Feel it first, then play. The girl followed her advice, and when she played again, her performance changed. It became smoother, more natural. Everyone noticed it. From that day on, people began to see Mira not just as a surprise guest, but as someone who had wisdom, someone who understood music from the inside out. Still, Mira stayed away from attention. She refused to perform publicly. "Not yet," she would say. "Maybe someday." Outside the school, her story started to spread. A music blogger wrote about the mysterious woman who had stunned a music school with her piano skills. Another article appeared in the local paper. People wanted to know more. Who was she? Where had she been all these years? But Mira avoided interviews. She didn't want to turn her return to music into a media story. "Let me just be a student again," she would say with a smile. One afternoon, a few teachers decided to test her again. Not in a cruel way, but out of pure curiosity. They brought her another difficult piece, a contemporary one, full of rhythm, changes, and modern twists. They knew this style was different from the classical training she had. Mira looked at the sheet, read it quietly for a few minutes, and then began to play. This time, it wasn't just good. It was mesmerizing. Somehow she adapted to the style as if she had been playing it for years. She added her own touch, subtle pauses, changes in expression, that made the piece come alive in a new way. The teachers looked at each other again. This woman wasn't just skilled. She was gifted beyond what they had ever seen. It became clear that Mira didn't just know how to play music. She understood it. She could feel its heartbeat, its breath. Her entire body became part of the performance, even when she sat still. A few days later, the school director invited her for a special meeting. He was an older man with decades of experience in music. "Education. My teachers tell me you're someone special," he said. Mira smiled. "I'm just someone who missed music." "I think music missed you too," he replied. He offered her a formal position as a guest mentor. She refused politely. "I'm not ready to teach yet," she said again. "Why not?" he asked. She looked at her hands. "Because I still need to learn how to feel joy while playing. Right now, it still hurts a little. But I'm healing." The director nodded. "Whenever you're ready, we'll be here." As weeks passed, Mira continued to come to the school. The students started to call her Mira Ma'am, even though she wasn't officially a teacher. Some came to her with questions. Others just watched her play in silence, hoping to learn from her. She never refused anyone. She never spoke of her past unless asked. But each time she touched the keys, people listened. And slowly the same teachers who once judged her began to admire her deeply. Some even started sitting in during her practice, trying to pick up small techniques, small tricks of the fingers, small insights she didn't even realize she was giving away. The woman they had once laughed at had become their silent teacher, and though she said little, her music spoke loudly. It told a story of loss, return, grace, and quiet strength. A story they were only beginning to understand. Days turned into weeks, and Mira's presence at the music school became part of its daily rhythm. Students would often stop their practice when they heard her playing. Teachers would peek through glass windows just to catch a few minutes of her sessions. Her music had a special kind of magic. It was soft, deep, and full of emotion. No matter how difficult or simple the piece, it never sounded forced when she played. It was as if the piano wasn't an instrument under her fingers. It was her voice, her soul. But even though she was respected, even quietly admired, there were still people in the school who found her presence unsettling. Some teachers, especially the younger ones who had just begun their careers, felt that their place was being overshadowed. One of them, Varun, had been working hard to build his reputation. He taught many of the school's brightest students and had a growing following. He often organized student concerts, led workshops, and was considered one of the most active instructors. At first, Varun had been impressed by Mira's playing, but slowly, admiration turned into something else. Doubt, irritation, and quiet jealousy. He started to question things. Who was this woman really? Why did no one know her last name, her full history? Why did she refuse to give interviews or perform publicly? Was her past truly as grand as people believed, or was it just a story made more romantic by mystery? One afternoon, Varun shared his thoughts with another instructor, Sheetal. "Don't you think it's strange?" he asked as they drank tea in the staff room. "No videos, no recordings, no proof of her past, just stories." Sheetal shrugged. "Maybe she doesn't want attention. Or maybe she's hiding something," Varun replied. "People are too easily impressed. She plays a few fancy pieces and suddenly everyone forgets the work we've done for years." "You sound bitter." "I'm realistic," Varun said, trying to sound calm. That evening he went online and searched for her name in old concert programs, music school alumni records, and classical piano forums. He found nothing. No interviews, no awards, no pictures. Just silence. That only made him more curious and suspicious. The next morning, the school buzzed with excitement. A national piano competition was going to be hosted in the city. The organizers had sent invitations to all top music institutions in the region. They wanted schools to send their best performers to compete. There would be cash prizes, media coverage, and offers for performance contracts for the winners. Varun immediately began preparing his top students. He held extra rehearsals, gave pep talks, and began planning what pieces his students would perform. He was determined to win. But the talk among students was different. Many of them whispered the same thing. What if Mira ma'am enters the competition? Even the most talented students secretly hoped she wouldn't. They respected her, but they also knew they couldn't match her. When Mr. Deshmukh mentioned the competition to Mira, she smiled and said, "No, I don't think so." "Why not?" he asked. "I'm not ready," she replied. "I came here to find peace, not trophies." "But you would win," he said gently. "And maybe some people need to see your gift in the open." She looked at him for a long time, then said, "Maybe one day, but not yet." Still, rumors spread. Some students claimed they had seen her practicing challenging competition pieces. Others swore she had said yes in private. Even the competition organizers heard about her and reached out, offering her a direct entry into the finals if she wished to perform as a special guest. But Mira politely refused. The pressure didn't stop there. One day, while she was leaving the practice room, Varun approached her. "Ma'am," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "would you mind helping one of my students with a competition piece? She's struggling with the emotional part. I think your guidance would help." Mira nodded kindly. "Of course." The next day, she sat with the young girl, listened to her play, and gave gentle advice. She didn't talk much about technique. Instead, she spoke about feeling the music, about imagining the story behind each movement. After the session, the girl's performance improved dramatically. The student thanked her, but Varun said nothing. He just watched. His eyes were filled with something hard to read. Later that week, he did something unexpected. He invited Mira to one of his competition rehearsals with other teachers present. "Would you like to demonstrate the piece for the students?" he asked, pointing to a sheet on the piano stand. It was a complex contemporary composition, known for its unusual tempo changes and technical tricks. A show-off piece. He handed it to her with a smile. Mira, sensing the challenge behind the invitation, didn't say no. She sat at the piano, read the sheet for a few moments, and then began to play. What followed was something no one had expected. Not only did she play it with technical perfection, but she also brought out a depth in the music that no one had noticed before. The odd rhythms sounded natural under her hands. The fast parts didn't sound rushed. The slow parts didn't sound lazy. They all flowed like water. When she finished, there was complete silence. Even Varun clapped, slowly, with a tight jaw. That night, the entire rehearsal group talked about her. And this time, not just with admiration, but with questions. Why wasn't she performing? Why was someone that brilliant hiding behind practice rooms and casual lessons? The day of the competition came. The school sent its top students, dressed in black and white formal clothes, each carrying their sheet music and nerves. The competition hall was large and elegant, with a grand piano at the center. Cameras were set up. Judges sat with pens ready. Backstage, everyone was nervous. And then, a surprise. Mira arrived at the venue. She wasn't dressed to perform. She wore her usual simple clothes, carried the same cloth bag, and had no sheet music in hand. But her presence caused a stir. People whispered. Some stared. A few judges recognized her from rumors and articles. Varun was visibly uncomfortable. His best student, Raya, kept asking, "Is she performing?" Varun said sharply, "No, she's just here to watch." But even that made people anxious. The competition went on. Performers came one by one. Some were brilliant, others nervous. The judges listened carefully, gave scores, took notes. As expected, Varun's student gave a powerful performance. She played with skill, confidence, and drama. When she finished, there was applause. But many in the audience still looked toward Mira. One of the judges, a respected pianist himself, approached her. During the break, "We've heard about you," he said. "Would you consider performing? Not for competition, just as a special guest to close the show?" Mira hesitated. Her heart began to beat faster. She hadn't played in front of an audience for years. All her practice had been private, quiet, personal. A performance meant exposing herself. But something inside her said yes. So she agreed. Word spread quickly. The final performance of the day would be a guest performance by Mira, the mysterious woman who had stunned an entire music school. When she walked to the piano, the hall fell completely silent. She didn't have a page in front of her. She sat, calmly adjusted her posture, and closed her eyes. And then, she began to play. It wasn't a flashy piece. It wasn't fast or loud. It was slow, emotional, and haunting. Notes flowed like memories. Each one was a soft whisper. People held their breath. Some closed their eyes. Some wept silently. In those few minutes, she gave them not just music, but herself. Every note told a story of a girl who once played for the world, then left it behind. A woman who lost her parents, gave up her dreams, and now, finally, was reclaiming them. Without a word, she let her hands speak. When the last note faded, the hall was completely still. Then came the applause. It started slowly, then rose into a wave. People stood, some clapped, some cried, others just stood in awe. Varun stood too, his face unreadable. Mira bowed gently and left the stage. She didn't stay for the awards. She didn't wait for interviews. She returned home quietly, her heart strangely light. She had faced the thing she feared most, not failure, but attention. And it hadn't broken her. It had freed her. And in the audience, among teachers, students, judges, and strangers, one thing was clear. They hadn't just seen a performance. They had witnessed the return of a true artist. After Mira's unexpected performance at the piano competition, a quiet storm began to move through the world she had tried to hide from. Although she had not planned to return to the stage, her music had made its way into the hearts of every single person sitting in that hall. Some had clapped with wet eyes, others with hearts pounding from emotion. But what truly surprised Mira was how quickly things changed after that single performance. The next morning, she returned to the music school as usual, dressed in her simple saree, carrying her small cloth bag and wearing the same quiet smile. But the atmosphere around her had changed. Students greeted her with more excitement. Some even stopped and stared as she walked by, whispering to each other in soft voices. Teachers nodded at her with respect that was warmer, deeper, and more curious. Mira noticed it all but said nothing. Mr. Deshmukh met her at the entrance with a cup of tea in his hand. "You've become famous again," he said, smiling. Mira looked amused. "I didn't do anything special." "You gave people something real," he said, "and real things don't stay hidden for long." As the days passed, Mira began receiving letters and phone calls. Former students from years ago had seen a clip of her performance online. One of the students from the competition had uploaded a small video secretly. It had gone viral. People commented things like, "Who is this hidden genius?" and "The world needs more of this music." Offers came from music institutions, classical music festivals, even small-town schools. Everyone wanted Mira to perform, teach, or at least share her journey. But Mira still held back. She thanked everyone kindly, but politely declined most offers. She was happy with her quiet routine, teaching a few students, helping beginners find their rhythm, and playing the piano when no one was around. The attention made her nervous. It reminded her of a past she had walked away from for very personal reasons, but the world did not let go so easily. One evening, a woman named Aparna visited the music school. She introduced herself as a music journalist and editor of a famous classical arts magazine. She had been following the viral video of Mira and was desperate to learn more. "I know you don't like interviews," Aparna said gently. "But would you consider just having a conversation with me? Not an interview. Just two women talking about music." Mira hesitated, then nodded. She didn't know why she agreed. Maybe she was tired of hiding, or maybe she was finally ready to speak. They sat in the garden outside the school, under a neem tree. Birds chirped in the distance, and a soft wind moved through the leaves. Aparna didn't pull out a voice recorder or take notes. She simply listened. Mira spoke slowly, quietly, like someone remembering things not just with her mind but with her heart. She talked about her childhood, how she had fallen in love with the piano when she was only 6. Her parents had saved every rupee they could to buy her first instrument. She had practiced in silence for hours, lost in the world of music. As a teenager, she had won competitions, traveled for concerts, and even dreamed of going abroad. She had once played in front of an audience of thousands, and yet felt the most joy in quiet practice rooms where no one watched. Then she told Aparna what she had never told anyone at the school. She had stopped performing after her parents died, in a car accident. It had shattered her. Music had suddenly felt meaningless. For years, she couldn't even touch the piano. Every note reminded her of them. She had left the stage, the concerts, the applause, and disappeared into a small life where she didn't have to be anyone but a daughter who missed her parents. Aparna listened with tears in her eyes. "Why did you come back to music now?" she asked softly. Mira looked at her hands. "I never truly left. The music lived in me even when I stayed away. But I needed to find my way back without the noise." The article Aparna later wrote wasn't just a story. It was a quiet tribute to Mira's life, written with so much heart that readers across the country were deeply moved. It was titled The Silent Symphony, Mira's Return to the Piano. She didn't reveal everything, respecting Mira's privacy, but she captured the soul of her journey. Once that article was published, more people reached out. A music university in Delhi invited Mira to hold a masterclass. A famous film director asked if she would consider composing background scores. A leading pianist even wrote her a letter saying, "After watching your video, I realized how mechanical I had become. You reminded me of why I started playing in the first place." Still, Mira continued living simply. She didn't chase fame. She didn't take on fancy offers. She kept teaching children who had never touched a piano before. She helped them find their first note, helped them believe that music wasn't just for the gifted. It was for the willing. One student, a shy girl named Naina, had trouble with even basic scales. Other teachers had almost given up on her. But Mira was patient. Every day she sat with her, spoke gently, encouraged her. Slowly, Naina began to find confidence. She smiled more. One day she played a small song for her mother, who cried because she never imagined her daughter could play music. This was the kind of impact Mira now made, not through big performances, but through quiet, consistent love for music. But the world continued to knock. The national television channel Doordarshan invited her to perform for their annual cultural program. It was a respectful, tradition-filled show, watched by families all across India. Mira hesitated again. She didn't want bright lights or cameras in her face. But Mr. Deshmukh, who had quietly watched her journey, said something that stayed with her. "You gave music to the silence inside you. Now let that music reach the silence inside others." That line stayed in Mira's heart. She finally agreed. When the day of the performance arrived, she wore a soft cotton saree and walked into the studio like any other ordinary person. But the moment she sat at the grand piano, everything else faded. She played a piece she had written herself. Simple, elegant, full of feeling. It was not fast. It was not designed to impress. It was designed to comfort. Millions watched from their homes. Some old, some young. Some musicians, some not. But everyone felt something they couldn't explain. In a world full of noise, Mira's music brought peace. When she finished, the host asked her, "What would you like to say to the young musicians watching today?" Mira looked into the camera and said gently, "Don't play to be seen. Play to be felt. Even if no one hears you, let the music be true." The clip went viral again. But now Mira was no longer a mystery. She was a symbol. A reminder that true talent doesn't shout. It whispers. That the deepest music comes from the deepest places in our hearts. That pain and loss don't have to end our stories. They can shape them into something beautiful. Back at the music school, Mira was the same. She still brought her own lunch in a tiffin box, still swept the piano keys with her hand before playing, still smiled more with her eyes than her mouth, but now when she spoke, people listened more closely. When she played, they heard not just music, but life. Even Varun, who had once doubted her, changed. He approached her after one of her practice sessions and said quietly, "I misjudged you. I'm sorry." Mira smiled. "That's okay. Sometimes we need to hear the full song before we understand it." He nodded, and they stood in silence, letting the unspoken words rest between them. As the season changed, so did the music school. New students came. Old students left for college or competitions. But one thing remained constant: Mira's presence. She became the soul of the school. No fancy title, no award, just Mira. The simple woman who had once walked into the school with dust on her sandals and music buried in her heart. Now she was not just a teacher. She was a light. Not a spotlight, but the kind of light that makes everything else shine more clearly. Months had passed since Mira's gentle music touched the hearts of millions. Though she had stepped briefly into the public eye, she had not changed her lifestyle. She still lived in the same small flat on the edge of the city, still cooked her meals with quiet joy, and still walked to the music school every day with the same worn-out bag and soft smile. Her popularity had grown, but she remained untouched by fame. Every day, new students arrived at the school. Some had heard her play on television. Others had seen the viral video of her competition performance. Many of them came hoping to see something magical. But what they found was even more special. Mira didn't put on a show. She didn't act important. She taught each student with care, as if every child was the only one in the room. She spoke softly, gave honest advice, and celebrated small improvements with the same happiness others showed for big victories. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. The school's principal called Mira into his office. He seemed excited, nervous, and unsure all at once. "There's someone here to meet you," he said, standing. A tall, foreign-looking man stepped forward. He introduced himself as Richard Lennox, a world-renowned pianist and head of a famous international conservatory in Vienna. He had flown to India after watching Mira's performance online and reading the article about her. He explained that he had spent weeks searching for her. "I was moved," he said. "Your music spoke in a language I have not heard in many years. It was not just technical brilliance. It was human, honest, emotional." Mira looked uncomfortable with the praise, but she thanked him politely. Richard continued, "I would be honored if you joined us in Vienna. We have a music conference every year, a gathering of the finest musicians from all over the world. We would like you to be the closing performer." For a moment, Mira didn't respond. The principal looked at her hopeful. Other teachers who had gathered outside the door peeked in with wide eyes. Everyone was waiting for her answer. But Mira simply said, "May I have some time to think?" Richard smiled. "Of course." That night, Mira sat alone at her window. The city lights blinked far in the distance. She thought about her parents, how they had always dreamed of her playing on international stages. She thought about her journey, about the years of silence, pain, and rebuilding. She also thought about the children at her school, the ones who looked at her not as a celebrity, but as a guide. She closed her eyes and asked herself a question. Is it time now? By morning, her heart had spoken. She called Richard and accepted the invitation. The news spread fast. For the first time, in years, Mira would perform on an international stage. Journalists started calling. Former students sent her emotional messages. Even some critics who had once forgotten her name now called her a legend rediscovered. But Mira didn't let it all distract her. She focused on preparing, not with pressure or fear, but with love. Every evening she stayed back after school hours, playing pieces, writing her own melodies, exploring emotions she had buried deep within. She didn't choose a flashy, fast-paced piece. Instead, she chose something close to her soul, a composition she had created herself, a story of silence and return. It had no title. It didn't need one. It was her life, told through keys. The day of the performance arrived. Vienna was cold, covered in soft snow. The concert hall was grand, with tall ceilings, shining chandeliers, and hundreds of velvet seats filled with music lovers from across the world. Backstage, other performers practiced nervously, some in expensive suits, others with long lists of awards next to their names. Mira sat quietly in a corner, wearing a simple cream cerise with a red border. She had brought no assistant, no manager, no fancy outfit. She didn't even carry makeup or jewelry. She had only brought herself and her music. When her name was announced, there was a moment of silence. Many people in the audience hadn't heard of her. Some raised their eyebrows, expecting someone young and glamorous. But what walked onto the stage was a woman of grace, wisdom, and peace. She bowed gently, sat at the grand piano, and placed her fingers on the keys. Then she began to play. The first note floated through the hall like a memory. It was soft but strong. Each key she touched seemed to speak. The music wasn't just heard. It was felt. It was like someone whispering their story into the wind, hoping the world would listen with its heart, not just its ears. People sat frozen, afraid to blink. Some leaned forward, unable to believe how such a simple-looking woman could produce such powerful emotion. Others closed their eyes, letting the notes carry them to places they had forgotten. Childhood moments, lost loved ones, dreams left behind. The piece didn't have high-speed runs or dramatic flourishes, but it had soul, and soul as everyone. realized that night, was rarer than skill. When Mira finished, she didn't look up for a moment. She just sat still, letting the silence settle like dust after a storm. Then she slowly stood and bowed. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the hall exploded with applause. Not polite clapping, but real, loud, emotional appreciation. People stood up, some whistled, others cried. Even the toughest critics had tears in their eyes. One older man, a famous composer, whispered, That was music." Mira walked off stage quietly, not overwhelmed by the applause, but filled with peace. She had shared her soul, and it had been received. Backstage, other musicians surrounded her. They wanted to talk, ask, understand. Some simply hugged her. Richard Lennox came forward, smiling like a proud teacher. "You didn't just perform. Mira," he said, "you healed something in us." In the days that followed, offers poured in. Teaching positions at global academies, invitations to collaborate, even a book publisher who wanted to print her life story. But Mira responded, to each with the same grace. "I will think about it." She did not say yes to all, nor did she say no to everything. Instead, she chose what felt right. She agreed to a few international workshops, but only ones where students had limited means. She performed at small venues that didn't have shiny lights, but had honest audiences. She said no to talk shows and celebrity events. Her rule was simple. Music must remain about truth, not fame. Back in India, her music school had transformed. Enrollment doubled. Students from across the country wanted to study under her. The government even offered to fund a special wing in her name, the Mira Center for Soulful Music. She accepted, but on one condition: the center must be open to all, especially those who couldn't afford formal training. Years passed. Mira grew older, but never tired. She played less in public, but more in classrooms. Her fingers remained gentle, her smile kind. She trained dozens of students who later became performers, teachers, and even composers. But every student carried a part of her inside them, not just the music she taught, but the love with which she taught it. One day a little girl approached her after class and said, "Didi, when I grow up, I want to play like you." Mira smiled and replied, "Play like yourself, Beta. That's even more beautiful." By the time she turned 70, Mira had become a legend, not one created by fame, but by feeling. Her music was played in hospitals to calm patients. It was taught in rural schools to inspire hope. Her recordings were used in therapy centers. And every year on the day of her famous Vienna performance, musicians gathered across cities and towns to play her untitled composition, her story, and Mira? She still lived in the same small house, still drank chai from her favorite clay cup, still walked to school, now with a cane, but the same rhythm in her step. One quiet morning, Mira passed away in her sleep, her hands resting gently by her side, as if still waiting to play one more note. The news spread like a whisper across the country. Millions mourned. But they didn't mourn with silence. They mourned with music. All across India, pianos played. Children she had taught performed in her honor. People lit candles, shared memories, and played her compositions with tears and pride. They didn't say goodbye with words. They said it with music. And in every note, Mira lived on. Not in posters or awards, not in wealth or fame, but in hearts, in the simple, pure, powerful sound of a soul speaking through piano keys. A soul that once sat quietly in a classroom, and then taught the world how to listen.